Hello and welcome to Let's Fix Computers. Today we're going to do a review on the Corsair H100i V2 water cooling system. So this is part of Corsair's Hydro series, which is probably one of the best known names in closed loop water cooling systems. It's the one that the vast majority of people all recommend going for, and with good reason, to be honest. On the whole, they're extremely reliable and they're very attractive water cooling systems. So this is the middle of the range one. You get the H80, which is their single 120mm radiator, which typically comes with 2 fans. This is the dual 120 or 240mm radiator, and then upwards from this you get the H110, which is a 280mm, which is dual 140mm fans. So realistically, this 240mm version, the 100i, this is all you really need unless you're going for a really crazy setup. This is already overkill for the vast majority of systems. So let's just unbox this and see what we've got in here. We've got a various array of fittings and fixtures here. This fits both Intel and AMD systems. We've also got a Corsair Link cable in there. We'll have a look into that a bit later. And then we also get 2 Corsair SP120 fans. So this is Corsair static pressure fans. Notice the big wide blades on these fans. They're designed to be up against a solid surface and still provide really good airflow. So these things will give really nice quiet operation. The other advantage as well is that they're PWM fans. Notice the 4-pin connector, which means you could spin these at super slow speeds without them stalling. And in addition to that, they're only running on 0.28 amps, so they're pretty low power as well. So we get a pair of these in here, and that will keep everything nice and cool. And that's it, that's what we get in the box. You don't get a huge amount in here, but you don't need much either. So let's get this box out of the way and take a closer look at the unit. Okay, so firstly, we've got the radiator itself. This is all finished in matte black, and it's a really nice quality paint finish as well. This looks fantastic. We've got the Corsair logo down on both sides, I believe, and in addition to that, the logo is inverted, so whichever way up you put this, it will still have the logo the right way up, which is a really nice touch. So you can put it in any orientation you want, and it won't look daft. These big hoses, they look very thick and heavy gauge, but they've actually got a fair bit of flex to them without kinking. So you can fit these in a surprisingly compact space. There is also a little bit of rotation on them that just allow you to fit this inside the computer without putting anything at horrible angles. Now if we move down to the end, to the business end of the cooler, we've got the main head, which contains the pump and various other pieces. So this is the latest design of it. So we've got the LED illuminated Corsair logo on it. That's an RGB LED in there, so by default it appears as white, but you can actually change the colour of that LED to be whatever you want. You can also make it reactive with the temperature of the computer, so you can have it start down at blue and you can have it warm up to an angry red if your computer is overheating and about to melt a hole in your desk. So coming out of the pump, we've got 2 wires. We've got a main power wire. This is for the pump. That plugs into your CPU output. And then we've got a pair of fan outputs here. These go directly to those 2 radiator fans, and those will manually control the radiator fans from here to make sure that they're spinning exactly the speed they're needed. So the great thing is that this thing will look after the fans itself. You don't have to rely on the motherboard or set up your motherboard fan controller as appropriate. So yeah. And then finally, if we look on the bottom of the head, we've got a nice solid copper core there. It's not exactly finished to a mirror sheen, but if you're chasing numbers, you could polish that up and get a nicer finish on it. It comes with some thermal paste already pre-applied, so we don't need to worry about that. And in addition to that, we've also got this dual mounting system. This fella here just snaps off if I rotate it. There we go. And that comes off, and then we can fit the AMD cooling bracket to it as well. Okay, right, so we've removed our stock cooler and I've fitted the stock AMD backplate with the Corsair standoffs in it now. Now take note, this bit of wobble, that's completely normal, it's supposed to be like that. However, you did notice that I did need to use pliers to screw these standoffs in. That is also normal. It feels really wrong when you're doing it, however it's the only way you can make them fit. So dear Corsair, please try and fix that please. I don't know if that's deliberate or not, but it's too hard to screw those in. I shouldn't need pliers to do it. So let's just trial fit that. However, the disadvantage with putting it here is our water cooling lines are coming down right on top of the CPU. So we're going to need a fairly tight spiral on the water cooling hoses here, which is what I was a little bit concerned about. But as I mentioned at the start of this video, you do get a surprising amount of flex on these things. So by the time we bend that around like that, it will go. So that's perfectly acceptable. We can get away with that. It looks a bit harsh, but it's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to screw the radiator in so that's held in place firmly, and then we can get that head fitted onto the CPU. Okay, so we've got our radiator fitted, we've now got the fans fitted as well. So we've got the fans fitted on the bottom, they're pushing up through the radiator, and we've got 8 screws, 4 per fan, with the washers fitted. I was going to put the washers on the other side of the radiator, just so the washers were against the rubber grommets. However, I noticed that these screws are actually a bit too long without the washers in. So unless I'm mistaken, they're supposed to be on this side, which seems a bit counterproductive to me, but you know, that's the way it is obviously supposed to go. So next thing we need to do now is get the head fitted on. So for that, I need to swap out which block I've got on the head. So we're going to change that out, and then that will just fit over the top of those screws. Okay, right, I've now just loose fitted the hold down bolts onto the head. And now what we're going to do, we're just going to shuffle these hoses about just to make sure that they're sitting nicely. We just use that little bit of rotation that they have on them and that little bit of flex just to make sure that they're not straining themselves. We've got no kinks in the hoses or anything like that, and that they're happy. So it feels really horrifying when you first put this bit on. However, once they're in, as you can see, we've got a bit of bounce on those hoses. They're not kinking, they're perfectly happy. So what we'll do now is we'll get the big screwdriver out and just screw those screws all the way down to the stopping points. There we go, those are now done up. Now I've not screwed those in as tight as I can possibly go. They don't need to be that tight. I've just screwed them up to the bite point where they just start to grip. So it's not going to fall off, which is what's important here. So now as you can see, we've got this nice setup on top. We've got the logo the right way up, so that's all going to look nicely. And we've just got to sort out what we're going to do with these cables now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just very carefully twist these cables around just so they're running straight down the back to under the fans here where they'll go out of sight. And we can plug in the radiator fans to those and tuck everything behind the radiator out of sight, out of mind. Right, okay, so that is all fitted. So we're going to start this up now, and we'll get the Corsair Link cable connected as well, and we can have a quick bit of play with that. The Corsair Link software, it's a really well-featured bit of software. However, in my experience, I find it to be a little bit unstable. So we're going to have another play with that just to see if it's any good these days. But if you don't want to use Corsair Link, that's absolutely fine. By default, on its default setup, this thing will just run as cool and quiet as it possibly can. So the Corsair Link software is not required, it's just an extra thing that can do fancy things with the LED and various other controls should you want to use it. The idea is that if you've got a Corsair case, fans, power supply and all the rest of it, all with Corsair Link, you can monitor everything from one bit of software. However, it's not really worth doing unless you've got Corsair Link on everything, in my opinion. So we're going to set this up, fire it up, and we'll see how it runs. Okay, so Now at the start of the video I probably mentioned that I wasn't a massive fan of the Corsair Link software. Now I'll eat my words on that because I've just downloaded the latest version of Corsair Link from their website. It's a new version and it's drastically better than the last one I saw. We've got a new layout that looks a lot smarter. Now you notice we've got a lot of red on here, but this is all customizable. We can change all the colors, all the accent colors, all the text colors. So you can really theme this to look like your computer. We've got an all new home screen, which gives you this really nice and clear dashboard with all the important headliner figures that people care about. Now the more Corsair Link devices you add to this, the more information you get. So if you've got a Corsair Link power supply, you can get data from that. You can do the same thing for SSDs, for the case, more case fans, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, even with just one Corsair Link device, the H100i, we already get a really nice little detailed stuff written down here. We can also run multiple profiles, so we can arrange things out. We can have performance and quiet profiles with different fan setups, and so on and so forth. We still, under the configure tab, we still get the nerdy little case layout here where you can arrange your thermal sensors in your case. However, I've never been a big fan of this design, to be honest. It's good for showing off, but I don't really find it useful. I think the home screen that they've got here is much more helpful in the real world, mainly because it groups similar items together. And in addition to that, we also have the graphing section where we can bring up graphs for all of these gauges as well, which help if you're doing diagnostics and monitoring in real time. So let's just ditch that graphing. And then finally, now focusing on the water cooler itself over here, we get the coolant temperature, we get the fan speeds, and we get the pump speeds. So we get a really nice monitoring on what this thing is doing. And now for the party tricks, if we click this configure button, we can change the color of the lighting. So if I just point out this light that we've got on the top of the cooler here, you can just see it from this angle. I can switch that off by just clicking apply, so we can make it go dark, or I can change it to any color I want. So if we change that to green, or the sort of turquoise color we've got, this is full RGB, so we can have any color in the spectrum we want. So whatever color your case is, you can make this fan suit it. And we can have a nice little fan warning light here, so the color will change onto red or whatever color of choice you want when it reaches a certain temperature. So you also get that little warning indicator if you're keeping an eye on your computer. So this software itself used to be horrifically unstable, but this new version is already looking 10 times better than the old one, and so I thoroughly recommend having it installed. You don't have to have it running in the background all the time, but I definitely recommend having it installed just so you can configure it. The final test I'm going to do, just to check if we can still do this, I'm just going to configure some custom lighting here. I'm going to set this garish looking purple on the color there. Oh, look at that, that's a hot pink we've ended up with. And now I'm going to shut down the Corsair Link software and restart the computer and just see if we can still get that fan color without the Corsair Link software running. What I really want to see is the device save that custom setup we've done and make it so we don't need to have the Corsair Link software running in the background in order to have that custom LED color. So let's give this a quick restart and just see if it holds that LED color after the reboot. The only disadvantage of the Corsair Link software that does still persist is that you do need to have the software running in the background in order to run these custom lighting setups, which isn't ideal. What I would like is that if it could save the lighting profile into the software driver, that way you don't have to have Corsair Link running in the background all the time. You can just start it up on demand. However, it's me being nitpicky because I'm a number chaser and I don't like having stuff running in the background. But of course you could argue that if you had Corsair Link on everything, you have just simply one piece of software covering all of your devices, so it would be worthwhile at that point. But past that, the new version of Corsair Link, vastly better than the older versions, and I recommend having it available to you even if you're not going to use it all the time. So other than that, I found this to be an extremely decent piece of equipment and I highly recommend it for anyone who's looking to take the plunge into a liquid cooling setup. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.